Finance Committee. We have a quorum, Mr. Smith and Mr. Weezer, myself, Bernard Parks as chair. We're going to do something a little different today on the agenda. On the items 9, 10, and 11, colleagues, if we can do a consent on those, then we can go to 7 and 8 on the regular agenda, and then we can clear the room and have items 1 through 6 in closed session instead of moving. So that was items 9, 10, and 11 for consent.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Okay.
That's good.
All right. Mr. Rosenthal has joined us. We'd like to do 9, 10, and 11 on consent. Take a quick look.
Chairman Parks.
moved by me too as well.
All right, we'll move those items. On number 11, if I could ask the CEO and the CLA to get together and see on that item whether there's a ability for the city to file an exemption waiver to the 5% level or 5% limit requirement on data collection and evaluation activities, and get that information to the clerk so that it could go in our committee report.
The only issue I have, Mr. Parks, on number 11 is I'd like them to take a look at the issues I have in Venice Beach on the same subject matter, and people with cars and campers. It's talking about loss of money. Just like them to take a deep breath and look at my
They can get a report back on the information to Mr. Rosenthal's request. This item is a matter of just moving money around in LASA that's already been allocated, but now it's going to become part of the new stimulus money, if I understand it correctly. But the thing is, if we can look and see if there's an ability to ask for a waiver on that issue and whether that saves us any of that money, because this money would be reverting to the general fund. Okay, on that item. So we move those three items, and then also we got a request on number 5 from the city attorney that we continue that. Do we have a timeline of when?
I think 1 to 2 weeks.
2 weeks? Okay, we'll continue that for 2 weeks. And so then if we can go to number 7, and we'll do 7 and 8, and then we'll go to closed session.
Okay, item 7 is the CEO report and resolution relative to authorization to issue up to $150 million in Mykla lease revenue bonds to refinance Mykla commercial paper notes and to finance recovery zone economic development bond projects.
Mario Vasquez with the City Administrative Officer. As Mr. Serrano just indicated, the CEO does request authority to issue up to $150 million in Mykla fixed-rate bonds for the refinancing of commercial paper notes and for the financing of recovery zone economic development bond projects. And in a meeting held last Thursday morning, the Mykla board did approve the recommendations contained in the CEO report.
Okay. Let me just ask you, so with all of the changing in the financial institutions, this weekend there was a big article about bankruptcy on CIT Group. Is that part of Citigroup? And so we'll know if we're dealing with a
No.
subsidiary. It's not?
No.
Okay, all right. You answered that question. Let me ask you on that issue. We've gone through a great deal of effort to come up with the bench for underwriters, and I thought that with the RFP that the guidance we received was that we would not add anyone outside of the RFP. And so I'm wondering, on this one, we're recommending that we add Citigroup Global Markets Incorporated.
Yes, Council Member, in September 2008, the CAO did recommend that 2 underwriting firms, as you mentioned, Citigroup and Bank of America, be added to the original pool. We took that recommendation, or made that recommendation because 2 of the original firms no longer exist, and that would be Lehman Brothers, that filed for bankruptcy, and Merrill Lynch, that was bought out by another firm. So our office did recommend the 2 new firms, Citigroup and Bank of America, be represented, or those 2 firms represent the next 2 highest ranked firms on the original list.
Then maybe I misunderstood, because from the way the notes are written, it appears we want to add them now subsequent to the RFP. So these were added as part of the RFP.
The RFP included 18 firms, and that report came to you almost 2 years ago. And we recommended the first 11 of those firms, not the full 18. So as firms have dropped off, we've come to you and said, let's start moving people up because we're running out of firms. So in September of 2008, we wrote a report that basically said these are the firms that we want to add because of name changes or because they're next on the list for whatever reason. That report has recently been referred to your committee for formal adoption. But when you adopted the original report, we said that all 18 were qualified. We just want to use the first 11.
Okay. So where...
Do your name for the record, just...
Oh, I'm sorry, Natalie
Didn't go
Brill,
on.
CAO's office.
Okay, so where is the report where the council approved adding them to the bench? Did that
It's-
come before us?
It's coming to your committee. It's recently been referred.
Okay, where was it?
It was originally referred to the Ad hoc Committee on Public Debt, Bonds, and Financing, and the committee did not take up that item.
So it's been there for a while then?
Yes.
A year
Yes.
and, yes.
Correct.
All right. The thing is that, I'm just trying to, because I know the questions that are going to come up at council.
Sure.
Is it appears that we're approving underwriters that have not been approved. And so what I'm trying to figure out is where that report is. If that report is merely adding previously approved, then we need to waive it out of this committee so it can go to council the same time this is dealt with, so we don't have the confusion of where they came from.
And we would ask if we can get it waived, because it was sitting before the prior committee for a while, and since that committee dissolved, then the files
If we
would
can
move
do
forward.
that, then that's the number one question, is that we
Okay.
can get that before the council at the same time that this report, or even
Great.
before, and then that way it then makes it clear as to where Citigroup came from.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, one thing I was wondering also, in dealing with Mykla, we're talking about a $150 million package. We're refinancing some of the items. Now, what is the construction item that we are financing? Is it, looks
It's,
like there's a new project.
It's $20.1 million of recovery zone economic development bond projects. There's a list of approximately 10 projects that make up the $20.1 million.
Now, we're,
And we have a copy for the clerk.
all right. Did you give us a copy? Because that's...
Yes.
So we're aware of what are the 20, is it 20 projects?
There's $20.1 million,
20.1 million.
and approximately 10 projects here.
If we can get a copy of that, then I think that nails down the second question as to what are the issues that we're dealing with.
The recovery zone bonds, if you want, I can explain to you a little bit. The federal government, as part of the ARA package, allocated funds to lots of cities, and we were one of them. We received approximately $180 million allocation from the federal government to issue taxable debt, but with a subsidy of 45% on interest. So that drops the interest rate quite a bit.
That's the one thing I want to mention to you, that's an area that gets overlooked. Most people that we've run into in City Family think it's 45% of the bonds, not the interest.
Of the interest.
Of the interest. And that's
Correct.
something that, every time you mention it, you need to say that phrase, because there's a misunderstanding of just what is being waived.
It's 45% of the interest. The last time you approved something like this was the general obligation bonds, where you did a Build America bond. That's 35% of the interest. So this is actually projects that are within the recovery zone that you approved, that are city projects that are ready to go, that would have gone anyway as part of Mykla. But now, because of the allocation that we were given, these projects are coming forward, not only as economic development projects, but also because of the 45% recovery in interest. So that's what makes them a little bit more unique than just refunding out commercial paper.
Okay. Is that-
No.
Okay. And then if we can just get that list of projects that would clarify that last point, so that everybody's fully aware of it. Let me just ask you a general question on Mykla. During Budget and Finance, there was some discussion that we've kind of gotten inverted, that initially Mykla was started with the idea of bricks and mortar, and then we've now gotten to where 80% of it is soft stuff, cars, radios, everything but bricks and mortar. what is our plan to cause that to go back to its original intent, or do we have a plan? Because just continue to buying radios and things that go away in 6 years, and we're paying 10 years and maybe 20 years for them. By the time we pay the debt off, we bought those same cars and radios 2 to 3 times. So do we have a plan to kind of get us back into bricks and mortar and pulling away from soft items?
Yes, we are looking at that. That policy issue, that policy change actually came up, as you mentioned, in the budget discussions last year. We actually had a meeting, I think, earlier last week, actually, to discuss how we're going to go forward in relationship to the 10-11 budget. And we are going to be putting together a plan that will gradually get us down, instead of spending the money on some of the vehicles and other things, where we actually move more to just financing what I'll call real property.
Now, is that going to be a budget policy? That's going to be a CAO operational policy?
It'll end up being actually a budget policy.
So that's going to come to us before the 10-11 budget?
Yes, we'll be drafting something, we'll be putting something before you.
Okay. So we'll move that item 7. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item number 8 is Department of Water and Power, Department of Airports, and Harbor Department reports in response to motion Parks Garcetti relative to the validity of vendor-submitted business tax registration certificate numbers and adequate control to assess those numbers.
Let me just say, I think all of you in some way responded to this, but it's dated back in 2008, so it's set, I think, in a couple of committees. We were waiting for Environmental Committee and Tourism Committee to deal with it before it came here, but it was getting so dated, we decided to bring it here. What we're going to ask you to do, if you can update your reports and tell us where you are now, whether we solved those issues that were in the controller's audit, have they all been resolved, and then we'll bring it back to committee when we hope we can get it back in 30 days, because it's so dated that we're pretty soon it's going to be meaningless. And we'll ask the clerk whether we can get the 2 committees to waive that, so that when it comes back, we can just send it to council, because we're dealing with almost going almost 2-year-old audit. You know, and this is dollars that we're dealing with, and so we're going to try to facilitate it. So that's what we need back. We realize you put the effort, you're very responsive. The dilemma is it got hung up, and we just like to get us a closeout on all 3 departments. Tell us where you are now, if you've satisfied all the issues in the controller's audit, and if you have, let us know what those are so we can facilitate it. And my assumption is, with all of that, there's going to be more revenue. We hope. And I don't know if we can figure that out, Ray, as to how much new revenue. But if everybody's abiding by our business tax issue, our assumption is that they go into gross revenue and all that other stuff, that we should be getting more revenue in the city government. So that's what we'd like to do, and we'll just hold this for 30 days. But if you get it back quickly, we'll ask the clerk to facilitate a waiver, and we'll move it in that way.
If I could ask, just the airport. I looked at the report. It shows that you're on top of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe we are. Mark Adams from the airport, I believe we are. And
Especially-
we have a process going forward that I think keeps us on track too. Yeah.
Great, because as you and I both know so well, all these vendors and all these folks are constantly banging on our doors as we go through our modernization and our other plans.
Correct.
Thanks.
I think, as you mentioned, is would be important for all the reports to reflect whatever you put in place, that we not get back to where we were before the audit.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just hold that and schedule it for 30 days to see if we can get that waived in the interim, and then when it gets here, we can just send it forward. Okay. We now have closed session?
Yep,
Okay.
that takes us into closed session. JOB? Oh, Field and Hill, okay. 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 Pay off them, okay, yeah, okay.
We're going to be in open session, now, return to open session. We have a quorum, Mr. Weezer, Mr. Smith, Mr. Rosenthal, myself, Bernard Parks as chair. The CAO is going to read a direction into the committee report for item number 6.
No, I'm sorry, this is actually item number 1. Going back to item number 1, this is regarding Mayday cases.
Okay.
That the committee needs to make a finding in open session that the city intends to make an interfund borrowing or advance from the reserve fund to pay the judgment on an interim basis, which loan or advance will be refunded or reimbursed with the proceeds of a judgment obligation bond.
And we can do that verbally on Wednesday.
It's actually part of the city attorney report. We just had to make sure it get read and open.
An open session, okay.
Yeah.
Now, was there some other wording for item 6 that you wanted to add about the funding? If so,
The basic
do we have to
win,
do that in open session?
we should do that in open session, yes, either way. Based on item number 6, the litigation status in case entire Monterey Hills investors, if the property is sold, if we proceed using Mykla CP to buy the property, if and when the property is sold, that the 100% of the proceeds must go back to pay off Mykla CP.
Okay.
Thank you.
You concur with that? No other items? So we adjourn?